All throughout both The Mandalorian and The Bad Batch, and even the sequel trilogy, we've been getting hints and teases around clones in much more of a focus than we've ever seen before. We have so many more details around that, and Mandalorian's finale gave us even more details. So, let's break this down. Welcome to Star Wars Uplink.
My clones were finally going to be perfect. The best parts of me, but improved by adding the one thing I never had. The Force. I was isolating the potential to wield the Force and incorporating it into an unstoppable army. And you smothered them before they could draw their first breath.
Mandalorian's Season 3 finale was quite the odd show.
Yep. It was kind of like the whole feeling of the season in that one episode.
Yeah.
Where it was like highs and then lows, and then you're like...
Why is that happening? What's going on here?
To what end? To what end?
But, going back to the clones, why are we mentioning all this? Well, one of the things, the hand-to-hand combat included the Beskar troopers, super commandos, could be what you call them. But they are, as far as we know, I'm not 100% sure on this, but I think they're clones. And I think one of the things is they could be clones of Moff Gideon because of that reference in episode 7 where he's like, and the biggest change, I'm in it.
Right.
And the most impressive improvement is that it has me in it.
Then we see the reveal that he is cloning himself. I think that could be that there are two different things that are happening here. There's one that it could be Project Necromancer, but we don't get the actual confirmation around that. But we could see that there is one wave of the clones that are happening with Moff Gideon that are fueling the Beskar troopers. Who in the galaxy would get paid to just stand in like a little laser field thing? You would have to design a clone trooper for that.
Oh, you mean just like standing there in the hallway?
Yeah, That's got to be a
Fair
clone,
enough.
right?
Fair enough. I don't know. We've
They're just
seen
standing
very,
there like...
we've seen very like opinionated, competent clones though.
Yeah, but you can also design them not to be like that. That was like a specific choice, right?
Okay.
So that's my theory, and my hypothesis is definitely hinging on the fact that they just stand there like all the time.
They are activated when someone not
Moff Gideon.
Not Moff Gideon, not allowed to go through there.
Yeah.
They're like triggered suddenly when the door opens. They're like,
Yeah.
ready to go.
Yeah, but like there's a lot of different things here, and then we get the big reveal in this finale that Moff Gideon's been playing around with cloning, specifically cloning for Force sensitivity. I love this because we've seen it so much in Legends with Palpatine doing the same thing. If you look at The Force Unleashed, that was one of the big things of, I think, the second game, where he's playing around with how can I clone someone and have them retain the Force? Because that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to clone himself to further cement his rule over the galaxy infinitely. And then that ties into the Rise of Skywalker even.
Yeah.
It ties into the sequel trilogy. So many different pieces. Like we've got the Praetorian Guards that are, we first see them in The Last Jedi. Then we see them in Mandalorian. And then we see clones, specifically clones around the existence of Force troopers, which we see all these different pieces around the Mandalorians. We see the cloning. We see all of these ties to the sequel trilogy. And I think we can go even further and make a tie back to the Bad Batch. The Bad Batch has been playing around a lot with the idea of how clones can be evolved and what they can do to bring it forward. And I think what they're doing on Mount Tantus and what they're exploring more and more of is the idea around what we see in The Mandalorian. And it takes that long to really get the payoff of it. And I think it'd be cool, like in Bad Batch Season 3, like towards the finale, you get that payoff of this is what they're doing. We get to see more explanation or just more details and more fleshing out of the idea of what cloning can do and some of the theories that they're trying to play around with but aren't successful until we get to something like The Mandalorian.
Yeah. No, I definitely think that that's where Bad Batch is going. I mean, they've already kind of been hinting at all this stuff. And yeah, I definitely think Bad Batch is focusing a lot more on like the nitpicking of like, we're just trying to make the best.
Yeah, they're starting. They're like, okay, let's make the best clones that we can. And then we see Dr. Pershing's research around how can we take two individual things, take different cells and different aspects from those two individuals or species and bring them into one clone.
Right.
And I think that's what a really fun tie-in, because the Mandalorian started because Moff Gideon was trying to use Grogu to get midichlorians or whatever
Force sensitive thing he needed to suck out of someone.
Yeah. And because of his extra life and because he's an existing and younger Jedi, he was the perfect candidate for that.
Yeah, so it's definitely cool to see. I mean, even in like the prequels, we have the beginning of the Clone Wars. So like we're like introduced there. And then to have the Bad Batch going in kind of in that in-between time, being a lot more focused on like, or vague but focused on developing more interesting and like specialized clones and then bringing that together to make it like a powerful clone. That's speculation.
All the pieces.
Yeah.
Because we've got the existing clones that we see that are like special made for this large army. We see the Clone Force 99, the Bad Batch, with very specific alterations or mutations. We see Omega, and we see how all of these different pieces are getting explored. They're getting experimented on, and we see that with Dr. Hemlock. And then we go a little bit further. We don't really get a whole lot of it in Rebels, but in Mandalorian we get a lot of it. We get teases in season 1. We get even more teases in season 2, and then season 3 paired with all of the Bad Batch stuff. Like, we're getting a lot of that depth around what the clones can do and how that's ultimately going to lead into the rise of Skywalker and Palpatine really taking advantage of that technology. And maybe in the future we see some of that really take place. We see hints and stuff after the death of the second Death Star, and we see bits and pieces of Palpatine's stores all through the galaxy. And then we see Project Cinder in the Battlefront 2 campaign around like Emperor's orders after his death. So we've got all of these pieces that are like just floating around in the ether, and it feels like Ahsoka, Skeleton Crew, Bad Batch, season 3, Mandalorian, they're all playing around with these different pieces.
It's really an interesting thought that I would never have suspected Star Wars to like universally have cloning as their like bread and butter topic. Like that is not where I thought Star Wars would ever go.
Yeah.
But here we are. Everything is talking about cloning and the ethics around that and how far we can push it or theoretically could push it. And it's quite the time.
Especially something so heavily influenced by the original trilogy, but taking these different pieces and really like bringing it forward, advancing the technology, but still keeping it that like rusty lived-in world that the original trilogy era is.
So all this talk about cloning begs the question, is Moff Gideon really dead? Or was that just a clone of himself?
You know, I don't even think it has to be a clone of himself, because we don't ever see, like, we don't see the boots on the ground. He's got he's wearing a full Beskar suit.
Right. I mean, he might have been cooked inside it, but
it's Beskar. It's incredibly heat resistant.
Yes.
It's incredibly strong.
We've seen people be burned before, first of all, and then we've seen people be burned and get up out of the fire without a scratch.
Yeah.
Obi-Wan, I'm looking at you.
We've talked about this before. Unless we see someone's head chopped off or they disappear in the Force, no one's ever fully dead. I think this season ultimately struggled with the idea that like Pedro Pascal's schedule, he didn't allow him to be on set for any of The Mandalorian. I think originally this season would have been much more focused on Moff Gideon versus Mandalorian and really like dive deep into that struggle here, because I think Moff Gideon is a very fascinating character.
For sure.
And I want him to be in more of the show. I just wish Star Wars in general would stop this whole like, oh my gosh, they're dead, and then the next season, no, they're not. They escaped prison.
Yeah.
Because I ultimately want to see Thrawn and Moff Gideon. I want to see that. And I want that payoff of those two interacting. Because I feel like Moff Gideon feels like he's better than Thrawn. But Thrawn is smarter and knows that Moff Gideon thinks he's better than him.
Yeah.
Do I think that Moff Gideon's dead? No. Do I think that he could have been a clone? Probably. Do I think that he's going to come back? More than likely.
Yeah.
Let us know your thoughts in the comments below on our theories, how the clones are really connecting, where it's all going, and if you think Moff Gideon is actually alive. Let us know.
And if you're as surprised as I am that Star Wars is all about cloning right now.
Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, and hey, check out our podcast. As always, may the Force be with you.